Hello and welcome to a discussion on food science around the world. And today we're going to talk about cultural cuisine. With our learning objectives today, we're going to be discussing acid cooking and specifically how it relates to ceviche. We're going to talk about nixtamalization and we're going to be discussing laminated and phyllo doughs. Let's discuss acid cooking with ceviche as an example. A little history and background. Ceviche is a fish dish marinated in a citrus-based mixture. It's most commonly lemons and limes that make that citrus flavor as well as that acidification. The original variations use fermented juice from the local banana passion fruit to cook the food with acid. And the origin is a bit disputed, but roughly 2,000 years ago, ceviche was made among the Mosh civilization, which is kind of like the current day northern Peru, and they did it as a preservation method. So that they had the fish, that was their daily catch, and if they wanted it to last a little longer, let's make some ceviche. After being colonized by Spain, the natives began using the citrus fruit. And recent studies indicate that the Incas also enjoyed ceviche. However, it was made from a fermented corn liquid called chicha. And around 1970, ceviche as we know it today was popularized, and now most of Latin America has their own variation of it. Think about ceviche. What are its sensory properties? Its taste is tart, refreshing, light, clean, spicy, and delightfully acidic. The spice level can vary depending upon the type of ceviche and the peppers used. So it can go from mild to very spicy. The texture is firm on the outside of the fish, but a little tender on the inside. If you're looking at the visuals, the fish gains an opaque appearance with a texture that's similar to heat-cooked fish. So even though you may think of this as a raw fish dish, technically the acid makes it look like it's actually cooked. If you're using shrimp, the shrimp turns a little pinkish, but is also going to go from translucent to, again, a solid color. With regard to the smell of ceviche, the fish should have a briny smell, not fishy. And depending upon the vegetables and citrus used, the ceviche smell may vary a bit. So citrus is the most common overpowering smell. Let's discuss the nutrient components of ceviche. So we've got some essential components, such as the fact that this is relatively low in fat. Obviously, you can vary the type of seafood that you're using in the ceviche. However, if you look here at this example with 250 gram serving size, only 1.9 grams of total fat are present. It is a great source of protein with, again, up to 26 grams of protein in a small 250 gram sample. Keep in mind that the amount of protein can also vary depending upon the type of fish or seafood used. We also have some carbohydrates in this particular dish. The carbohydrates are coming from the vegetables, which have fiber, starch, as well as some sugars. And not only do we have some macronutrients like the fat, the protein, the carbohydrates, it also has some very important vitamins and minerals that it's going to be high in. For example, we might have vitamin D from that seafood itself, vitamin C from the citrus, vitamin B12 from the seafood, calcium, iron, potassium, and more. So depending upon the ingredients you have in your ceviche, you could have more and more of these vitamins and minerals or these micronutrients beyond what we're even displaying here. We also have some other components, like because it is a product that has living organisms in it or organisms that have been harvested, there is going to be cholesterol associated with this ceviche. And if we have too much cholesterol in our diet, this could lead to high levels of blood cholesterol. So we do want to be careful not to overconsume too much cholesterol. So let's discuss different variations of acid cooking dishes. So we have ceviche, and to continue to discuss it, this is the most common type of acid cooked dish with lots of different combinations of fish and vegetables depending upon the country itself. For example, we have aguachile, which translates into chili water, which is a specific type of ceviche from Mexico that's known for its spiciness. We also have leche de tigre, which means tiger's milk, and this is a Peruvian ceviche beverage, which is actually made of the marinade that was used to cook the ceviche. It's often used to cure a hangover. We also have kiluan. This is a Filipino salad that's similar to ceviche but uses vinegar instead of citrus to denature the proteins. And in this particular dish, meat is more common than the fish that you might see in something like ceviche. The kiluan is often eaten as an appetizer during drinking sessions. So let's learn about some of these food science principles. For example, why do we have the acid? Well, the acid from the citrus actually is going to denature the protein or unwind it. And it's going to be chemically cooking it so that that fish actually looks like it has been cooked itself in the oven. The protein is made of long strands of amino acids, and they are arranged in a particular order. The order gives it its properties. So like I said, if we have the acid there, that's going to break the hydrogen bonds between the amino acids, which allows those amino acid chains to denature or uncoil, therefore changing its properties. The seafood becomes more tender, but it looks like it's cooked, and so the color has changed, and this is the food science behind making ceviche. So myth or fact, the acid used to denature the protein in ceviche inhibits the growth of bacteria. Well, this is a myth. Multiple studies have shown that there is not a significant difference in bacterial growth between the ceviche and the raw fish. So if you have someone who might be concerned about food safety, or if you have an at-risk population like very young individuals or very old individuals, people who might be immunocompromised through cancer treatments or other things, you might want to make sure that they understand that even though it looks like it's cooked, it has not actually been cooked to kill those bacteria in full. When we're discussing the safety and regulations of ceviche, it's important to understand that the pH of 3.3 or lower is needed to kill harmful bacteria. With ceviche, the pH levels under 4.6 might slow down the growth of bacteria. However, the ceviche is not going to be really acidic like that. So we might have some common bacteria like Listeria and other ones listed here like the enterotoxigenic E. coli that can make you kind of sick. So you do want to be careful and understand what you're putting yourself at risk for if you're consuming that ceviche. Like we mentioned, the acid used to cook the ceviche, that citrus acid, only drops the pH to 5, which is not low enough to kill those bacteria. So the raw fish has a pH of about 6.5, so even that is going to be a concern, even if you're having things like, let's say, some sushi with raw fish. So keep in mind when you're consuming raw fish or even fish that is cooked with acid, then ultimately there are some risks that you are taking. As we continue to discuss safety and regulations, when picking out fish to use for ceviche, use either very fresh fish or fish that has been flash frozen after harvesting. The fresher, the less time for bacteria to grow. Keep in mind, if fresh is not an option, frozen does work too. And a little bonus of frozen is that freezing actually kills certain types of parasites. But I do want to remind you, freezing is not going to kill those bacteria. Ceviche should be avoided during pregnancy. Pregnant individuals should not consume it because it might not harm themselves, but it could potentially even harm the baby. So we want to make sure that these pregnant women themselves don't get ill or again make their baby ill through the consumption of the raw seafood product. Restaurants are required to show a written raw seafood warning if they are serving ceviche as well. Let's continue the discussion with nixtamalization. A little history and background. Nixtamalization is a process in which dry maize, similar to corn, is cooked in an alkaline solution in order to remove that outer pericarp. Nixtamalization dates back over 6,000 years ago in Mesoamerica, which is current-day Mexico. Maize was a staple food of ancient civilization in this location. And nixtamalization was done because it improved the texture, taste, as well as it was known to help with illness. These illnesses we now see as deficiency diseases. The earliest versions of nixtamalization used ashes from local plants such as juniper to alkalize the maize. Later iterations used calcium oxide. Indigenous people would grind the nixtamal and turn it into masa, which was then made into a flat round cake. Later the Spanish called this flat round cake a tortilla. So you may want us to tell you a little bit more about the nixtamalization process. Well, first we're going to take the whole dried maize kernels and soak them in that alkaline solution. This softens the maize pericarp. Then the kernels are cooked at around 95 to 98 degrees centigrade, so just below that 100 degrees centigrade boiling point. They do it for 30 minutes and they're going to steep it in that cooked liquor remaining from the cooking process itself. Then the starch is going to be partially gelatinized through that heat and water exposure. The heat also denatures the protein a little bit, not totally, but it's going to partially denature it. So we're unwinding that protein quaternary structure. The remaining grains, known as nixtamal, are washed and strained through to remove the remaining alkaline solution, and then it can be used as hominy or further processed and ground to create that masa. And store-bought ground masa is dried to increase its shelf life. So you can see it as this dried masa. And you may wonder, so what are some benefits to nixtamalization? One is that we have an increase in the bioavailability of vitamin B3 or niacin, as well as iron. The process is going to convert the bound niacin into nicotinic acid, and we also have an increase in the amount of calcium that's available for individuals. It significantly reduces the presence of mycotoxins such as fumanicins and aflatoxins. And fumanicins and aflatoxins are poisonous substances that are produced by fungi and found in raw cereal grains. Another benefit of nixtamalization is it can potentially increase the shelf life because it helps control the microbial activity itself. Let's talk about the chemistry of nixtamalization. We use these alkaline solutions to help break down the pericarp around that maize itself. We've got a list here of a variety of different alkaline solutions you could choose from. And once that pericarp becomes solubilized, then we have a situation where we are going to hydrolyze ester bonds. When we hydrolyze the ester bonds, the cellulose, hemicellulose, and lignin structure starts to break down a little bit. Therefore, it's going to allow for that pericarp to again further be broken down so that we have a different product afterwards. We have heteroxylans, which form, creating a porous surface and therefore making the pericarp very weak and even easier to remove. The pores also allow for calcium to get stuck in there during the steeping process and get diffused into the endosperm in a good way. This increased pH, or again the alkaline or basic solution or product, is going to create an unfavorable condition, so it decreases the likelihood of microbes growing. So you may be curious about the applications of nixtamalization. Well, most people paid attention and learned that we have tortillas, which are delicious. And depending upon the maize that are used for the tortillas, it can be white, yellow, or even blue. Next, we have sopas. These are thick tortilla-like cakes that are fried in oil. They are delicious. Oftentimes they are topped with different vegetables and they are absolutely amazing. Next we have arepas. These are thick round maize cakes which are originating from South America. Arepas can be stuffed, topped with things that are like sopas. Additionally, they can be sweet or savory. Next we have pupusas, and these are native to El Salvador. They are thick tortillas stuffed prior to cooking, and they can be stuffed with things like cheese, beans, shrimp, fish. They're typically topped with a seasoned cabbage, and they have a special tomato sauce associated with them. So if you're not hungry yet, I know I am. These all sound absolutely amazing. And I look forward to trying all of them eventually, but unfortunately I've only tried the top 2 thus far. And if we didn't tempt you with the prior foods, we've got 3 more things that you could potentially try, like tamales. Tamales are maize cakes stuffed with meat or cheese, chiles, herbs, fish, or vegetables. They're wrapped in banana leaves or a corn husk before steam cooked. So depending upon where you're consuming them, if you're consuming them in central Illinois, then generally it's a corn husk. If you go down to Mexico, sometimes they might have it in those banana leaves. Next we have tehuino, which is a beverage made from fermenting the masa and the polocino. And so that beverage itself is a product of nixtamalization as well. And then we have pozole, which is a Mexican soup or stew made with hominy. It is absolutely amazing. I know I've had it for breakfast before or a side for dinner. And again, oftentimes people will take a lime and squeeze it on top and have it with something like a tortilla on the side. So definitely some fabulous products that you may not have realized are products of food science. So if you want to make some homemade sopas, let's look at the recipe itself. We have some ingredients, so 4 cups of masa, any color maize will do, 2.5 cups of water, half a teaspoon of salt, 1.5 cups of refried beans, 1.5 cups of shredded chicken, 1 cup of Parmesan, and 1 cup of romaine lettuce, which is chopped. We can even add some green or red salsa to this and some vegetable oil to fry that sopa in. You may notice that this picture is going to depict what it is that we are making. However, you can top your sopa with sweet things or savory, or you can eat them just by themselves if you want. So if you want to make some homemade sopas, what you're going to do is mix the masa, the water, and the salt and knead it until a dough forms. Then divide it into 20 portions, flatten them to make a thick tortilla. Then you're going to put them in a pan and cook it on each side about 1 minute until it's lightly browned. Then carefully with either a paper towel, tongs, or even your fingers, lift the edges of each sopa. And then what you can do is, in another pan, fry the sopas in vegetable oil. You're going to then flip it as you fry it. Then when you notice that they, again, get a little expanded, and then again, you have more of that Maillard reaction, or again, the browning, then take them out, place them on an absorbent paper towel to remove the excess oil. Then you can top it with beans, chicken, lettuce, cheese, salsa, and enjoy. So let's review the sopas recipe. What is the science behind it? Why do we use the masa and not regular ground corn? Well, nixtamalization chemically changes the maize, allowing it to form into a dough that's different. The masa also helps keep its structure after cooking. You may wonder, what's the purpose of adding water to the masa? Well, water helps rehydrate the dried masa powder and restores it to its original wet dough-like consistency. Let's talk about laminated and phyllo doughs. A little history of laminated doughs. The famous puff pastry was invented by Claudius Gay in France in 1645 after trying to bake a cake for his sick father. His father was on a flour, butter, and water diet, so he tried kneading the dough into layers, making this laminated dough. But despite what he thought was this amazing discovery, centuries before, people of India had been enjoying flaky paratha bread through the exact same method. But the exact origin is not necessarily known. It does use simple lamination to create its flaky texture, and today we have laminated doughs that are common in croissants, Danish pastries, paratha, xiaobing, and more. And very similar, but not exactly like the previous dough that we had discussed, we have phyllo dough. And phyllo dough was first seen in the 11th century in medieval Turkey, though it was called yufka. It wasn't until Greeks widely adopted this dough that the term phyllo was given, and phyllo means leaf in Greek. Around the 15th century, the well-known baklava was created by the Ottomans, and earlier versions may have existed, however, the origins are disputed. So you may wonder, what's the difference between a laminated dough and phyllo dough? Well, laminated doughs are typically made with some ingredients, but one of them is a solid or mostly solid fat, like butter, that allows for the layering. To create the layers, it's folded many times and spread with butter between each fold. Layers show up like flaky air pockets when it's cooked. In contrast, the phyllo dough is made with only water, flour, and vinegar with a little oil instead of the thick butter that you might use in the laminated dough. If butter is used with the phyllo dough, it's generally a melted butter that allows for the layering versus the solid butter that we might use in the dough that we're making with the laminated doughs. To create the layers with phyllo dough, the dough is rolled out extremely thin and then individually layered on top of each other. Layers stay clearly defined in that final product. So the laminated dough, the dough itself has again that solid fat. We're going to be layering, kneading, folding, layering, kneading, folding, where with the phyllo dough, we have, again, a thin layer. We put a little bit of oil or butter, another layer, little oil or butter, and again, another thin layer. So again, different final products with that laminated dough versus a phyllo dough. So let's discuss some food science principles for laminated doughs. When we're making the dough, the water and flour react to create this gluten, or the gluten is going to be kind of coming out of that flour itself. The gluten is a protein that provides structure to the dough. We also have butter, and butter is an emulsion made of primarily fat, but we have a little bit of water and some milk solids that are going to be there, making that butter its characteristic butter flavor and consistency. It must be cold and solid for the laminated doughs. If the butter is not solid while working the dough itself, the emulsion will break and the water will be absorbed into the dough, creating a bread-like texture rather than those characteristic flakes that you enjoy in your croissant. When baking, the heat causes the water to evaporate and create steam pockets. Some of the dough also uses yeast, so it depends on what it is that you're making. And we even have more air pockets with individual food products that do have that yeast in them. Heat also denatures the proteins from the dough, causing them to harden and leave a shell around the steam pockets. So we have this protein carbohydrate reaction, which is going to again allow for that hardening. The pockets then become these desired layers. In contrast, let's discuss the food science principles for phyllo doughs. After the gluten is created by mixing the water and the flour, again, the gluten is in that flour itself. It kind of takes on its characteristic gluten principles when it's going to be mixed with that water and made into the dough. The dough is needed to further develop the gluten into that characteristic texture and to make it more stretchy. We add vinegar, which is going to help what we call condition the flour and allowing, again, more gluten to kind of take on that characteristic gluten-y feel. And it's critical because the dough itself is rolled very, very, very thinly. So again, a little vinegar with this one where we don't have vinegar with the last recipe. Additionally, another difference between the phyllo dough and the other dough is that with the phyllo dough, we have liquid fats. So we either have oil or we have melted that butter itself. And so with that oil or melted butter, it helps hold in moisture while layering, preventing the layers from cracking or tearing. The oil also works to crisp those thin layers while they're baking, and so it ultimately kind of like fries those layers, creating that distinct layered texture. So if you're trying to determine what are the applications for the laminated doughs, well, we have a few different ones which we're going to highlight, but this is not an extensive list. So for example, we have pain au chocolat, which is also known as chocoline in the southwest part of France. It's a type of French croissant stuffed with a high quality chocolate, and it is absolutely delicious. This is made with the traditional lamination method. We also have paratha, which is a flat bread native to India and Pakistan. It's usually made with whole wheat flour and quick laminated with ghee. To serve it is sometimes stuffed with vegetables like potatoes, radishes, or cauliflower. We also have sheobing, and these are Taiwanese breakfast flatbreads that are covered with sesame seeds. It's made using quick lamination, and they're often split open and stuffed. So what are some of the applications for phyllo doughs? We have baklava, spanakopita, and sero tigana. With baklava, this is a Turkish sweet dessert made from many different ways and enjoyed all around the world. Typically, baklava is made with nuts such as pistachios, and there's ample amounts of butter in there. They are delicious. There's often honey that's drizzled throughout or on top of it, or even saturated in the dessert itself. We have spanakopita, and this is a Greek spinach pie made with phyllo dough as the crust. They take on this traditional triangle shape, and you can have them as an appetizer or even as a component of the main meal itself. Even though traditionally it has, again, the spinach and a little bit of feta inside of it, we can have other ingredients as well. And the sero tigana. These are sweet spiral-shaped pastries with the phyllo dough, and they are deep fried. After frying, they're dipped in honey and sprinkled with crushed almonds. It's a traditional wedding treat in Crete. So if you're still left with some questions, feel free to stop by the Virtual Tutoring Center or my open office hours. We are here for you as you learn more about cultural foods.